Yes.
Which photos struck you as suspicious?
There were several pictures that looked like they were taken from a distance, and they were pictures of Bella lying on a mattress from a distance. She was either sleeping or unconscious. It was hard to tell.
And did you have a chance to examine the date stamps on those photos?
Yes.
And what about the date? Were the date stamps relevant to you in your analysis of whether they were suspicious?
Very much so.
How so? How so?
After looking at the photos, it was clear to us that the pictures were taken while she was sleeping. There were photos taken the following day that Bella was appeared to be happy and healthy.
Did you see any photo that appeared to you as if Bella had a black eye of some kind?
Yes.
And were you able to review any photos that helped you evaluate whether she had a black eye?
Yes.
What type of photo?
Other photos that were taken after. That one photo that it appeared she had a black eye, it was just the contrast, the shading of the exposure.
Were there a series of photos taken on the same day, on the same time?
Yes.
Did you see any photos of Bella with blood on her face?
No.
Aside from, well, you said most of the pictures were of Bella. How would you describe, well, let me ask you, was there a predominant expression that she had in those photos?
Yes.
What was that?
She was happy.
Were there pictures of, any pictures of anyone else besides Bella?
Yes.
Who was perhaps the next most sort of common subject of the photo?
The common subject would be, there should be a lot of pictures of food.
Okay. But I mean people, who's it?
There were selfies of Rochelle herself and her family and friends.
And you say pictures of food?
Yes.
What kind of food?
Just, it appeared to me that anytime Rochelle made something, she would take a picture of it.
Were there, you described earlier in your testimony that there were subpoenas issued for cell phone records.
Yes.
Is that correct? And were there subpoenas issued for the cell phone that we've been referring to as Michael McCarthy's cell phone ending in 5294?
Yes.
Were there subpoena for cell phone records for the phone that has been referred to as D's cell phone, which I think ends in 2492?
Yes.
Was a subpoena issued for cell phone records for what's been referred to as Rochelle Bond's old cell phone?
Yes.
And who was in charge of those subpoenas?
Trooper Swan with assistance from Sergeant Krause.
Who's Sergeant Krause?
Sergeant Krause, spelled C-R-O-U-S-E, he's a trooper with special services of the Massachusetts State Police.
And did the cell phone records include cell site location information data?
Yes, sir.
And just generally, because there'll be more testimony about that, what is cell site location information data?
Cell site location data is just the approximate geolocation of the cell phone as it's being used, the direction from the tower that it's hitting off.
And when you received, by the way, did any other subpoenas go out for information pertaining to Rochelle Bond? Specifically, was there a subpoena issued for her Facebook account?
Yes, it was a warrant was applied for.
A search warrant, okay.
Yes.
Thank you for correcting me. And did you receive a record of Rochelle Bond's Facebook account?
I did.
And there have been, what was done with the cell site location information with respect to the defendant's phone, D's cell phone, and the new cell phone that Ms. Bond bought apparently on or about September 16th of 2015?
There was some mapping that was requested.
And who did that mapping?
Sergeant Krause.
And who reviewed it?
Trooper Swan, and I was shown segments of it as well.
And was there also, did you also have occasion to review the forensic analysis of the defendant's cell phone?
Yes.
Did you have a chance to review the forensic analysis of Ms. Bond's old cell phone?
Yes.
And in reviewing the analysis of the defendant's cell phone, did you notice, specifically with reference to the period from late May until September, did you see text messages back and forth between the defendant's cell phone and Dee's cell phone?
Yes.
In particular, did you have a chance to review text messages from July 16th, 2015, when Ms. Bond appeared to be in housing court?
Yes.
Did you note in the course of reviewing the records of the defendant's cell phone that there were conversations back and forth, what appeared to be conversations back and forth between the defendant and Ms. Bond?
Yes, I did.
Trooper, at some point in this investigation, did a baseball bat become relevant to your inquiry?
Yes.
And when was that? When did that become? Did you learn of its relevance?
During the first time I remember it being relevant was that during pretrial interviews.
Was there a time before that when let me ask you, were you aware at some point during the grand jury presentation of the relevance of a baseball bat?
Michael Sprinsky may have mentioned it. I don't recall just now.
Would it refresh your memory? Could I show you something to refresh? Might it refresh your memory if I show you something?
Yes.
Whatever.
Okay. Well, he says he didn't recall, and he can show him whatever he'd like to attempt to refresh his recollection.
Yeah, but the recollection is hearsay.
Well, I don't know what.
I don't intend to
He's
introduce
not
the
in-
substance of it, just to refresh his memory about when he first learned of the relevance.
Yes, so that it's not as to what was said about it, but rather when it came to his attention.
I apologize. Yeah, approach her.
Yes.
I'm showing you grand jury testimony of October 16, 2015.
And
Sorry, I'm showing you a grand jury testimony of October 16, 2015 of Michael Sprinsky. Just, if you could read the bottom of page 30 to the top of page 31 to yourself. Top of page 31. Does that refresh your recollection as to when you first learned the relevance of a baseball bat to the investigation?
Yes.
When was that?
October 16th during grand jury.
October 16th of 2015.
Yes, sir.
And by that time, well, was the apartment still frozen for the search warrant that you could, either of the two search warrants that you conducted there?
No, sir.
And did you have a chance? Did you have a chance in preparation for trial to review photographs taken of the execution of the search warrant?
Yes, sir.
And as a result of reviewing that, did you recall whether there was a baseball bat present during the search?
There was.
And was it seized at the time?
No.
Why?
At the time, it was not relevant to our investigation.
You didn't know that it was relevant?
Yes.
Trooper, I'm asking you, I'm going to show you an item and ask you if you recognize what it is. Can you see that?
Yes.
And do you recognize what that's a photograph of?
It's a photograph of the entryway, the front entryway to the apartment at 115 Maxwell Street.
And is there, well, is that a fair and accurate depiction of how that front entryway looked when you executed the search warrants there?
Yes.
Ask that this be marked next sequential exhibit.
There being no objection, I'll admit it. Exhibit 96.
Publishing Exhibit 96 to the jury. Trooper, if you could, as this is coming up, if you could please use your finger to circle. It looks like the gallery's not coming out good.
Can the jury see it? No. Okay, let's readjust.
Trooper, if you could just with your finger circle the baseball bat. Okay. May the record reflect the witnesses circled the baseball bat in the lower right part of the photograph.
Yes.
You indicated that Kathleen Richards turned over 2 cell phones to you, one of which she identified as hers. Is that right?
Correct.
And I think you testified that she consented to allow you to examine it. Is that right?
Yes.
She turned over a second cell phone to you?
Yes.
And that's one that you indicated she said was the defendant's?
Yes.
And for which you sought and obtained a search warrant to search it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have that phone with you?
Yes.
Could you please produce it? And maybe if you could grab all the phones at the same time, that's probably good. And with the court's permission, I think you can do this from the witness stand if you want.
That's fine.
You don't have to stand up. So if you would, remove the phone that Ms. Richards gave you and identify as the defendant. And what's the model of that cell phone?
It's a Samsung.
Does it indicate a model number on the phone itself?
No.
So I ask that, Your Honor, this be marked the next sequential exhibit for identification.
Okay, for identification?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. We just need to give it to the court reporter. You want the phone itself marked with an ID?
I think maybe mark it in the envelope is probably less likely to have the sticker fall off.
Okay, let's do that. We ask for identification.
Is it
S is in Sam?
S is it Sam? I think you also indicated that Joe Amoroso turned over a cell phone on September 18th
Yes,
that he indicated belonged to Rochelle Vaughn. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Do you have that phone with you?
I do. Do you want me to take it up?
Yes, please. And you could show it to the jury. And is that, what model is that?
It's a Samsung as well.
Does it have a model number on it?
Not that I can see.
Ask that that be marked T for identification.
Okay.
You indicated that a week later, Mr. Amoroso turned over another cell phone, the forensic examination which you reviewed. And there were a lot of pictures of Bella as well as Ms. Bond, family and friends. Do you have that phone with you?
Yes.
Could you please produce that phone? If you could show it to the jury. And what's the brand of that phone?
It's a Nokia.
Does it have a model number on it?
No.
And the cell phone that's been identified in this trial as D's cell phone, was that phone ever recovered?
No, sir.
Were there additional cell phones beyond the ones that you described? Were there additional cell phones recovered during the search of 115 Maxwell Street?
Yes.
How many of those were there?
There were 4 additional phones.
And in the course of preparing for trial, were those cell phones examined?
Yes.
And were the numbers assigned to them able to be identified? Just yes or no?
No. I don't believe all of them, but I'm not positive.
Did any of them prove to be the cell phone referred to as D's cell phone?
No.
Detective, I'm going to show you a series of photographs and ask you if you recognize what they depict. Do you recognize what that's a photograph of?
Yes.
What's that a photograph of?
It's an entrance to a abandoned parking lot and a parking lot used by the T in South Boston.
And is it connected to this case?
Yes.
How?
It's a location that I was able to identify following Rochelle Bond's account.
You said when you went to look for the weights in a duffel bag?
Weights in a duffel bag.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of how this scene appeared in September of 2015?
Yes.
Is it working? Sorry, there appears to be technical difficulties with the screen, so I'm trying to reset it. So I'm showing you another photograph. What does that depict?
The same location,
Is that a sort of a view going a little further down the road?
just a little bit inside that gate.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of how that appeared in September 2015?
Yes.
Actually, I think I'll just, with the court's permission, I'll show them the rest of the photos and then ask one question about fair and accurate depiction, just to speed things along. Show you another photo. Trooper Herman, what's that a photograph of?
It's another image further along that road leading down to the reserve channel.
And yet another image.
Same further along the road, closer to the reserve channel.
And then one last image. What's that a photograph of? Oh, wait. What's that a photograph of?
It's photographed at the end of the road. The road ends and it's the edge of the water overlooking the reserve channel.
And do those 5 photographs fairly and accurately depict how the stretch of that road from, is it First Street out
East First Street.
East First Street down to the water appeared in September 2015?
Correct.
Counsel, please be marked the next 5 sequential exhibits.
There being no objection, those are admitted.
Trooper, showing you Exhibit 99 and also publishing it to the jury. The view of this road, does it look the same today? If one stands at this gate and looks down the road, does it look the same today as it did in September of 2015?
The road itself, yes. There's a parking lot area that's not visible in this photograph that's since been improved a little bit.
And is there construction now that forces you so that you can't go straight down to the water on this road?
Yes.
Trooper, showing you Exhibit 98. Is this the end of that road?
Yes.
And are there today concrete barriers that block that sort of path, a sort of rough dirt path or rough paved path down to the water?
Yes.
And were those concrete blocks there in September of 2015?
No.
Trooper, you described on September 21st of 2015 a diver named Mackenzie, Trooper Mackenzie, recovering a duffel bag and some weights. Do you have the duffel bag with you?
Yes.
Could you, with the court's permission, leave the stand and retrieve that?
Yes.
And if you could hold that up for the jury, I guess you're already doing that. And is that the duffel bag that was recovered by Trooper Mackenzie?
Yes.
And understanding that it's now dry and it came out of the ocean, I presume, wet, is that how it, essentially how it appeared when you saw it, when Trooper Mackenzie brought it up?
Yes.
Ask that that be marked the next exhibit, Your Honor.
Okay, it's admitted. Exhibit 102.
Trooper Herman, I should have up on your screen a photograph. Do you see that?
Yes.
And what is that a photograph of?
This is a photograph of the duffel bag as we retrieved it from the water.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of how the duffel bag appeared when it was retrieved from the water?
Yes.
Has to be marked. I think it makes sense to mark this one 102A, Your Honor, since it's a photograph of 102.
Yes, there being no objection, that's admitted. 102 bag.
And Trooper, showing you Exhibit 102A and now displaying it for the jury. There are orange things toward the bottom of the area of the bag. I'm actually going to draw a circle around it to tell you what I'm talking about. Do you see inside the circle the orange things?
Yes.
I'm not great with colors, so if somebody sees it, it's some other color, but they look orange to me. What were those?
Just some type of sea growth or something. I don't know.
Okay. And were they there on the bag as it was pulled up?
It looked just like that, yes.
Trooper, you've described weights that were recovered from the diver recovered. I'm going to show you items that have been marked for identification. For the record, I'm showing the witness what's been marked I for identification. And what's been marked K for identification. And Trooper, if you need to remove them from the bag, you may. And before I ask you questions about that, I'm reminded by co-counsel, thank you very much, the Nokia phone that was provided to you by Mr. Amoroso on
Yes.
September 25th, Your Honor, I asked that that be marked. I think it's going to be V, like Victor, for identification.
Okay, yes, we were up to that letter, I believe.
Thank you, and I apologize for going out of order. Trooper, could you hold up, well, first of all, do you recognize exhibits I and K for identification?
Yes.
And what do you recognize them to be?
A 10-pound weight and a 25-pound weight.
And where do those weights come from, at least in terms of, to your knowledge, where is the first time that you saw them?
They were recovered from the reserve channel.
These are the weights that Trooper McKenzie brought up?
Yes.
I'd ask that these be marked, I think it's going to be 103 and 104, Your Honor.
There being no objection, those are removed.
And Your Honor, there being no easy way to do this on the document monitor, I would ask that the witness remove the items from their packaging and just walk the jury up to the jury to show them each of the two weights. And for the record, the witness has just displayed Exhibit 104 for the jury. I think if you could display 103. And Trooper, I'm now showing you on your screen a photograph. Do you recognize what that's a photograph of?
Yes.
What is the photograph of?
Those are the two weights that were recovered from the reserve channel.
And where was this photograph taken?
They are, in that photograph, they're on a body bag that we used to temporarily hold them when on the boat.
And is there anything else depicted other than the body bag? And just to be very clear, the body bag has nothing to do with this case, is that right?
That's
It's
correct.
basically being used as a tarp to protect the boat.
Yes.
And other than the weights, is there something else depicted in that photo, sort of behind one of the, or under one of the weights?
The duffel bag.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of how these weights appeared to you after they were removed from the water and placed in the boat?
Yes.
Ask that this be marked Exhibit 105, Your Honor.
There being no objection, those are removed.
You can just briefly publish Exhibit 105 to the jury, Your Honor. Trooper, you indicated that you were involved in a search warrant for Joseph McCarthy Sr.'s plumbing shop on the, I think you said Tuesday, September 22nd in the evening, is that correct?
Yes.
And was there an area of the plumbing shop that your search focused on primarily?
Yes.
What was that area?
The basement.
Why the basement?
That's where the weights were recovered.
I'm going to show you two photographs and ask you if you recognize what they depict. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm sorry. You testified that you recovered 3 weights. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you recall, and it's okay if you don't, you can refresh your memory, but do you recall what make and weight each of the weights were?
One of the weights was a York, and I don't recall the other brands. We collected a scattering of 3 or 4 weights.
If I suggested to you that one of the brands was a USA barbell 50-pounder, does that sound right?
Yes.
And one was a CAP or AP, I'm not sure, the model 25-pound weight?
Correct.
And the York barbell that you recovered was how many pounds?
A 25-pound.
Why did you recover the 25-pound York barbell?
Because it matched the brand of the barbell that we recovered from the reserve channel.
And why did you recover the other 2, a USA 50-pound barbell and a CAP or AP 25-pound barbell?
We collected a scattering of weights that were there, and additional, one of the weights that we did recover had a smoother surface that we thought might lend itself better for fingerprinting.
No, that's, well. So Trooper, I'm now showing you a photograph and ask you if you recognize what it depicts.
It depicts a weight inside the plumbing shop.
Does it actually depict several weights?
Several weights, yes.
And is it focused on one in particular, sort of in the center of the photo?
Yes.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of how those weights appeared when you conducted the search warrant?
Yes.
And showing you another photograph. Do you recognize what that's a photograph of?
Yes.
What's that a photograph of?
This is a photograph of a York 25-pound barbell.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of how that York barbell appeared when you conducted the search?
Yes.
And is that photograph, looking at that photograph now, is that the same weight as depicted in the photograph I showed you just before?
Yes.
And do you have the York barbell depicted in those photographs? Did you bring it with you today?
Yes.
Or actually bring it with you previously? Showing the witness what's been marked Exhibit J for identification. Do you recognize Exhibit J?
Yes.
And what is that?
It's a York 25-pound barbell.
That's the, and have you seen it before?
Yes.
Where did it come from?
Yes. This is the barbell that we recovered from the plumbing shop at 618 Hancock Street.
That's supposed to be marked Exhibit 106. And Your Honor, at this time, and I'm not sure that all the jurors necessarily will want to or be able to, but I would ask that Exhibit 106 be given to the court officers and passed among those jurors who are willing to hold it.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Just be careful with it when you pass it, because it is pretty heavy. And while that's being done, Mr. Deacon, just to straighten out some exhibits marked for identification, we were marking cell phones, and we have the Samsung phone, which was referred to as defendant's phone for Ms. Richards, as S for identification. Rochelle Bond's, I think what would be described as her newer phone, T for identification. Rochelle Bond's Nokia phone, the older phone, U for identification, And then Amoroso's phone, V for Victor, for identification, is that right?
It seems to me I just have the use sticker here, I don't know where it goes.
So Mr. Amoroso's phone, okay. The court reporter wasn't sure where the V for identification went, and that's Mr. Amoroso's phone.
I think it was handed back to the witness. I think the witness took it.
Okay.
It hasn't been marked. You
The-
has not been marked yet.
So you, we'll make sure this is straightened out at the break, Mr. Deacon, but just we want to make sure. My record shows that that would be what's been referred to as Rochelle Bond's older phone, Nokia brand, a U for identification, Mr. Amoroso's phone, V for identification. So just make sure that that gets marked. Okay.
And if that could be returned to the witness. Thank you, Mr. Hurd. Now I'd ask that the photographs that I inquired of before be marked next to sequential exhibits.
On the photos, he described his depicted weights, right?
Yes. Trooper, I'm going to ask you, when you handled the weight just now, the one that's been marked as exhibit 106, 25-pound New York barbell, when you handled it, what was your experience? How did your hands feel after you handled it?
It's heavier than it looks, and my hands are, there's some rust residue.
And just showing you now exhibit 107. You can see exhibit 107, and is it coming up for the jurors?
Yes.
If you could just circle the York 25-pound barbell that's, thank you, Mr. Court Officer, that was very, very thoughtful. Much more thoughtful than me for asking them all. Thank you, appreciate that. Exhibit 107, do you see the York barbell that is now exhibit 106?
Yes.
If you could just circle that, please. May the record reflect the witnesses identified a single, apparently slightly rusty barbell toward the upper part of the picture in the center.
Yes.
Trooper, I'm now going to show you two more photographs and ask you if you recognize what they're photographs of. First of all, what's that?
It's a photograph of a USA brand 50-pound barbell.
And is that one of the barbells that you seized from the basement?
Correct.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of how it appeared?
Yes.
And what is that a photograph of?
This is a photograph of what I believe is a 25-pound cap barbell.
And is that that you seized?
Yes.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of that barbell?
Yes.
Ask that these be marked next to sequential exhibits.
There be no objection on it.
Publishing these very briefly to the jury. So exhibit 109 is the use of the 50-pound USA barbell. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And exhibit 110 is the 25-pound cap barbell. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And just to be clear, when you seized these weights, did you believe that in some way they were specifically related to the weights that were found in the reserve channel during the dive?
Not these two.
Okay. What was the purpose of selecting these two weights to seize if they didn't match the weights for the dive?
We collected an assortment, and again, these two, the USA and the cap, had a smoother surface that would lend itself more to collecting a fingerprint.
Trooper, I'm going to show you a photograph. And ask you if you recognize what that's a photograph of.
It's a photograph of 3 weights.
And where were those? Do you recognize those weights?
Yes.
And where did you see them? Where have you seen them before?
Those weights were on the floor of the, there was a scattering of weights that were in the plumbing shop.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of how these 3 weights appeared as you executed the search warrant?
Yes.
Ask that this be marked next sequential exhibit, Your Honor.
That's exhibit. Exhibit 112. 111. 111.
I'm now publishing exhibit 111 for the jury, Your Honor. So Trooper Herman, showing you exhibit 111 and directing your attention, and I will zoom in on this for everyone's sake, but in the middle of exhibit 111, there's a barbell, sort of in the middle between 2 other barbells. And can you see, have you had a chance to review this photograph?
Yes.
And can you see what sort of barbell is in the middle of those 3?
Yes.
What sort of barbell is in the middle of those 3?
It's a Billard. It appears to be a 10-pound barbell.
I'm zooming in. Is that the barbell? First of all, I'm actually going to zoom out for ease of reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm circling a barbell with my finger. Is that the Billard barbell that you're describing?
Yes, sir.
And now zooming in on it. Which I think in this system doesn't actually help that much. But I'll zoom out a little bit. Have you had a chance to examine this photograph next to the item, the 10-pound Billard weight that was recovered from the reserve channel?
Yes, sir.
And to your eye, do they appear to be dissimilar or similar?
They appear to be similar.
And why was it, Detective, given that the Billard weight in this photograph, well, first of all, was it recovered from the search warrant?
That particular weight, no.
Why not, if it's similar in appearance to the Billard weight that was recovered from the reserve channel?
All of the weights were photographed and documented, and we took an assortment of weights. We didn't take all of them.
In retrospect, would you take this one if you had it to do over again?
That one, yes, it being the matching brand.
Trooper, I'm going to show you a few other photographs and ask you if you recognize what they depict. And we'll go through this quite quickly.
If there's no objection, we might just go ahead and remark them if they're more of the same, but I'll just leave it to you, Mr. Deacon.
Yeah, that would do. I think that makes sense unless.
No objection.
Okay.
In that case, I'd ask that they be pre-marked.
Okay.
Marked as just next to sequential exhibit. I think there are 5.
112 to 160.
So Trooper, displaying these briefly in order from, this is Exhibit 112. Is this one of the weights that you've found and photographed at the plumbing shop?
Yes.
And I have the same question as to Exhibit 113. Is that one of the weights you saw and photographed at the plumbing shop?
Yes, sir.
Same question as to Exhibit 114.
Yes, sir.
Same question as to Exhibit 115.
Yes, sir.
And then finally, as to Exhibit 116.
Yes.
You testified that during the search of 115 Maxwell Street, the second search, that when you went back, that you recovered a mattress, is that correct?
Yes.
And you also said that, and was that sent for testing?
Yes.
And you also said that you recovered books involving Satanism or demonism, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have those books with you?
Yes.
Can you please produce those? Just the two books. These were recovered from the apartment?
Yes, sir.
I asked that these be marked next sequential exhibit. Next sequential exhibits.
117 and 118.
This is subject to,
The pretrial ruling, yes. Your objections notices as to that.
Trooper, I'm going to show you two photographs. And ask you if you recognize what they depict.
This photograph depicts the kitchen at 115 Maxwell Street, apartment number 2.
And in particular, what area of the kitchen?
Next to the stove, the kitchen countertop.
And is that a fair and accurate depiction of how that kitchen counter appeared during the execution of the two search warrants?
Yes.
And then I'm showing you another photograph. Do you recognize what that depicts?
It's a zoomed in image of the picture we just looked at.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of the, well, I guess that would have to be that if it's zoomed in photograph.
Yes.
Ask that these be marked next sequential exhibits.
Yes, that's okay. 119 and 120.
Showing you exhibit 120, Trooper. Could you indicate by drawing a circle in that around that photograph where in that photograph exhibits 117 and 118 appeared. May the record reflect the witness has drawn a circle around two books, what appear to be books, in the basically dead center of the photograph.
Yes.
Showing you exhibit 117. Trooper, I've opened it to the headings page. Can you just read, you don't have to read the numbers, but just read the chapter headings from that exhibit?
Acknowledgements, preface,
You can
introduction.
skip those. Go to the chapter heading.
Ancient origins of the devil, demonic belief in power, the prince of darkness evolves, a mania for witchcraft, the power of possession, exorcism, expelling demons, the exorcist and the possessed, changing attitudes to the devil, critics and supporters, still a need to believe, demystifying the devil, and the wiles of Satan versus the Bible, bibliography.
Trooper, during the course of your investigation, did you research the defendant's background?
Yes.
In particular, and this is at the time, did you research his registry of motor vehicles history?
Yes.
And did that your research at the time produce a list of addresses associated with Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
And Trooper, in preparation for trial, did you cause to be delivered certified copies of registry of motor vehicle records pertaining to Michael McCarthy?
Yes.
I'm showing you, flip quickly through 4 pages of a document and ask you if you recognize what it is. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is that?
This is a 4-page document provided to me by the State Police Compliance Unit, the troopers that work within the Registry of Motor Vehicles.
That's what this be marked next sequential exhibit, Your Honor. Publishing Exhibit 121 to the jury. Starting on page 1 of the exhibit, do you recognize what this is?
Yes.
What is it?
It is a RMV printout screen for Michael Patrick McCarthy.
And do you see the information about Michael Patrick McCarthy on there?
Yes.
Specifically, do you see a birth date?
Yes.
And what is that birth date?
His date of birth is 5/29/1980.
And during the course of your investigation, did you learn Mr. McCarthy's birth date?
Yes.
And is that the correct birth date?
Yes.
Did you also learn his driver's license number?
Yes.
And there's a license number indicated in the upper right side. You recognize that?
Yes.
Is that his driver's license number?
Yes, it is.
Showing you page 2 of the exhibit. Do you recognize who that's a photograph of?
Yes, I do.
It also indicates the social security number. Do you see that?
Yes.
And does that match the social security number that you learned to belong to Mr. Michael McCarthy?
Yes, it does.
Looking at page 4, do you recognize what that record is?
Yes.
What is that record?
It is a document provided from the compliance unit. It's a historic license ID and demographic information.
And are you familiar with this document from your work as a state trooper?
Yes.
What is it?
It's basically as it's titled, it's a historic listing of any address that you lived, and the registry associates you with either registering a vehicle or listing as your home or mailing address.
And does it go essentially in reverse? So from the top and most recent down to the bottom oldest?
Yes.
So I'm going to direct your attention to the bottom of page 3 of this exhibit. And do you see the addresses listed in the last 2 entries here?
Yes.
What address is listed?
722 East 2nd Street, Apartment 2, South Boston.
And then showing you page 4 with 3 more addresses listed. What addresses are listed for the last 3 entries?
722 East 2nd Street, Apartment 2, South Boston.
And what's the earliest date associated with that address?
1996, June 6th, 1996.
When on June 6, 1996, well, how long after Mr. McCarthy's 16th birthday would that be?
That would be close to his 16th birthday.
About a week after, a little over a week after.
Yes.
Are you familiar with 722 East 2nd Street?
Yes.
And where is it located?
722 East 2nd Street is located off of Summer Street in South Boston.
Summer Street, and what's the closest intersection to Summer Street there?
Summer Street and L Street.
And how far away is that from the area that was depicted in the photographs we showed with the road that led from, I believe you said it was East 1st Street down to the water? How far is 722 East 2nd Street from there?
1 block.
I guess I can show this on a moment. Okay. Oops. Showing you a map. Can you see it?
Now, yes.
Do you recognize what that's a schematic layout or map of?
Yes.
What's that?
It is an overview map of an arrow indicating the location of 722 East 2nd Street and a pin drop with the grid coordinates of the remote location where evidence was recovered.
The weights in the duffel bag?
Yes, sir.
Does that diagram fairly and accurately depict the relationship between 722 East 2nd Street and the pin drop point where the evidence was recovered?
Yes.
Ask that this be marked next sequential exhibit, Your Honor. Publishing exhibit 122 to the jury. So exhibit 122 is now on display. Trooper Herman, if you could please just circle the house that's indicated as 722 East 2nd Street. And circle the pin drop for the location where the evidence was recovered. And you indicated if you had to estimate the total distance, meaning as the crow flies between those 2 locations in feet, yards, whatever makes the most sense to you, how would you estimate it?
I would guess approximately 300 yards.
And can you circle where, if one was going to turn into there to take that road down from, that we saw in the earlier photographs, from East First Street down to the water, where's that turning? May the record reflect the witnesses circled an area just below the midline in the center of the diagram.
Yes.
I have no further questions.
Can you just clear the screen? Of the green
Oh, yeah,
markings,
sure.
yes. Unless Mr. Shapiro's mastered that.
Good afternoon, Trooper Herman.
Good afternoon, sir.
Trooper Herman, you testified a while ago about learning or getting some information concerning a baseball bat.
Yes.
And you said the first time that you obtained any information about a baseball bat was from Michael Sprinsky on October 16th of 2015.
To my recollection, yes.
But that wasn't true, was it?
I don't remember the first time being told anything about the baseball bat.
I'm not talking about Sprinsky. You found out about a baseball bat from Michelle Bond on September 18th, didn't you?
It's possible. I don't recall.
September 18th was the day that you made, well, let me put it this way. September 18th was the day that 115 Maxwell Street was still frozen, correct?
That's correct.
It was still secured.
Yes.
Nobody was allowed in or out other than investigators.
Correct.
You could have gone back and searched for anything that you thought was appropriate.
Yes.
And in fact, you did another search several days later, on September 22nd.
Yes.
And on September 22nd, the apartment was still secured.
Correct.
I'm going to show you a document. This is page 17 of Michelle Bond's statement to you on September 18th. I'm going to ask you read it to yourself, specifically lines 7 through 10.
Yes.
Does that refresh your recollection as to when you first heard about a baseball bat?
Yes.
September 18th.
Correct.
At a time that the apartment was still secured.
Yes.
When you heard about it, you obviously didn't think that was at all relevant to your investigation, did you?
At the time, it was not relevant to the investigation, no.
despite the fact that Rochelle Bond told you it was there. She told you the circumstances it was there, correct?
Yes.
And when you later talked to Michael Sprinsky, he didn't tell you anything in addition to what Rochelle Bond told you, did he?
No.
So you told Mr. Deacon that somehow on October 16th, all of a sudden it became relevant, but that's not true, is it?
Just wasn't relevant to us at the time. It was.
What made it relevant between September 18th and October 16th? Did you learn any more information, I just asked you, from Sprinsky than what Rochelle Bond had told you?
No, I think that he just probably highlighted it a little bit more, maybe in his description, but it wasn't, and still isn't now, anything that's of vital relevance.
So you're saying it's not relevant?
In my opinion, no.
So all the testimony about the baseball bat, the photograph of the baseball bat, not relevant,
It's something that's documented, not vitally important.
not relevant. Now, you also told us about a number of cell phones that you obtained, correct?
Correct.
Now, one of those phones you described as a phone belonging to Rochelle Bond.
Yes.
And that phone was referred to as Dee's phone, correct?
We were not positive of the ownership of that phone, but we,
Well, you recall testifying at the grand jury, did you not?
yes,
And at the grand jury, you testified that the phone ending in, do you remember what it was ending in?
I do not.
Phone ending in 2792. You described that as Rochelle Bond's phone, didn't you?
If it was described as Rochelle Bond's phone, we may have believed it to be belonging to Rochelle at the time.
Okay. And that was when you testified at the grand jury over a period of several months, correct?
Correct.
And when you testified at the grand jury, you were testifying under oath.
Correct.
And you testified, did you not, that the phone ending 2792 was Rochelle Bond's phone, and that it was referred to in the text messages as Dee's phone.
Correct.
And you explained that the D came from Rochelle Bond's middle name of D-E-E.
That was an assumption at the time, yes.
Well, you testified about it under oath, didn't you?
Yes.
You didn't testify to the grand jury that we're just making an assumption, did you?
No, as the investigation progressed, we learned more about that phone.
When you testified at the grand jury, you testified under oath that that was Rochelle Bond's phone, and the D in the description of the phone referred to her middle name, correct?
Correct.
Now, you've told us about the recovery of a number of different phones at different times and at different places, correct?
Correct.
Now, you went to the hospital where Mr. McCarthy had been admitted, correct?
Yes.
And you went there on September 17th.
By the time we got there, it was September 18th. It was after midnight.
Okay, but you had learned that he was in the hospital earlier that night.
We had learned that he was in one hospital, and troopers eventually tracked him to a third hospital where he was ultimately located.
Okay, and did you learn that he had been transferred because of the need for surgery that was only available at Beth Israel?
Yes.
But you had learned that he was in the hospital earlier that evening on September 17th.
Yes.
And then you say you sent a trooper when you knew that he was in Beth Israel to be where he was.
Yes.
And do you know what time that trooper got there?
I don't know the exact time he arrived, but it was late at night, if not after midnight on the 18th.
Late at night
It was either
on the 17th?
a few minutes before midnight or after midnight on the
Oh.
18th.
Okay, so before midnight on the 17th, a little after midnight on the 18th.
Yes.
Now, when that trooper got there, were all of Mr. McCarthy's possessions at the hospital secured?
I don't know about his possessions. When I got there, it was 1 a.m., and I did not get to see him or his possessions.
Was any effort made at any time to secure whatever possessions Mr. McCarthy had at the hospital?
No.
So, no effort was made to search his belongings that were at the hospital?
Nope, we only spoke with an acquaintance that was at the hospital with him.
Yeah,
And
I know, but that wasn't my question. My question was, this is a murder suspect, correct?
Correct.
You arrested him when?
The following day.
Is that true?
The following day, he was interviewed, and I believe it wasn't until he was medically cleared where we could physically take him into custody.
Now, in that time period, did you ever obtain whatever belongings he had when he was admitted to the hospital?
No.
Isn't that standard procedure in a homicide investigation to obtain the person who's arrested the property of?
It would be at time of interview and arrest, and I also am not positive if he had any possessions.
But you're telling us you never even checked?
Me personally, I did not. I cannot confirm that the trooper sitting on him didn't check, but me personally, I arrived at
But-
1 a.m.
But you would agree, would you not, that that's a standard practice?
It's something that we would do if there were something in his property that we wanted to take possession of.
Of course, if you didn't know what was in the property, you wouldn't be able to know if there was something there, would you?
Correct.
So it's standard procedure to check the property of a person who's arrested,
Yes.
but you didn't do that.
He wasn't under arrest at that time.
Well, at any time before or after he was arrested at the hospital, did anybody check to see if he had any possessions?
I can only say for sure that I didn't. I can't say that the troopers there at the hospital did not.
Did you ever ask them?
Not to my recollection.
But in any case, it's fair to say that you didn't recover any possessions from him.
No.
But you did recover a telephone,
A cell phone, yes.
a cell phone, from a woman by the name of Kathleen Richards.
Correct.
And she gave you the phone, told you it was his phone.
Yes.
And she didn't have any other phones, did she?
She had her own phone.
And she gave you that phone.
Correct.
So she gave you two phones. One she said was Mr. McCarthy's. One she said was hers. Correct?
Correct.
And both of them were analyzed forensically.
Yes.
And you determined that one did belong to Mr. McCarthy, correct?
Correct.
And the other did belong to her.
Yes.
And there were no other cell phones obtained from Mr. McCarthy, from the hospital, or from her.
Correct.
Now,
Is this a good time to take the...
sure, that's right.
So we'll do that.
Good afternoon, Trooper Herman. When we were talking this morning, you indicated that the phone ending 2792 was a phone you identified when you testified before the grand jury as Rochelle Bond's phone, correct?
Correct.
And you indicated that that phone was referred to in Mr. McCarthy's contact list on his phone as Dee's phone.
Correct.
And in the text messages that came up between Mr. McCarthy and Rochelle Bond, the calls to or from her phone were referred to as to or from Dee's phone.
Correct.
And you also indicated that you believed that the D came from her middle name as Rochelle D. Bond, correct?
Yes.
Now, of all the phones you have described that you recovered either from Michael Sprinsky, from Kathleen Richards, from Joey Amoroso, from 115 Maxwell Street. There were a lot of phones, weren't there?
Yes.
There were actually four phones that you recovered during your search at 115 Maxwell Street.
Yes.
And those phones were recovered on September 17th and 18th.
Correct.
And then you said there were two phones recovered from Kathleen Richards. One was her phone, one was Mr. McCarthy's phone.
Correct.
And you verified that one of the two phones she provided was Mr. McCarthy's phone.
Yes.
And then you testified you got a cell phone from Michael Sprinsky,
Yes.
and you verified that as Michael Sprinsky's phone.
Yes.
And then you got a total of 3 phones from Joe Amoroso, correct?
Correct.
On the first day when you interviewed him after picking him up at his mother's house in Lynn, he gave you 2 phones, correct?
Correct.
One of them, he said, was his phone, which he consented to your doing a search of, correct?
Yes.
And the other phone was a phone that he gave you and that, he said, was Rochelle Bond's phone.
Correct.
And did you verify that that was Rochelle Bond's phone?
Yes.
And you also were able to determine that that phone that Joey Amoroso gave you was the phone that Rochelle Bond had purchased on September 16th, just 2 days before.
Correct.
And you did a forensic examination of that phone, correct?
Yes.
And then there was a third phone that Joey Amoroso didn't turn over to you.
It was turned over to us about a week later.
But he didn't turn it over to you at the time he turned over Rochelle Bond's phone that had been purchased 2 days before.
Correct.
And in fact, he didn't tell you that he had another phone from Rochelle at all, did he?
I was under the impression he called us as soon as he realized he was in possession of this phone. He called Lieutenant Murphy.
But what do you mean, when he realized he was in possession of it?
The phone was in a small bag. It was in a small purse, small backpack. There was a phone in it. When Joe Amoroso realized he had this, he called Lieutenant Murphy and told him that he had another phone that he wanted to give us.
It's true, is it not, that before he turned it over to you, he reviewed it?
He did. He looked
He
at
looked
it.
through the photographs?
Yes.
He looked through the bag and the possessions? Correct?
Yes.
And he didn't turn it over to you until a week later. That is, a week after he was first interviewed at the police station.
June 25th. Yes.
Okay, so that's a week after September, not
Yes.
June.
September.
September. Now, when you did a forensic examination of that phone, did you make any determination as to whether anything had been deleted from it?
That would be a standard procedure that our lab personnel would do.
Do you know if that was done?
Yes.
Did you review that extraction?
I viewed the extraction. I viewed all of the photos. Yes, I went over the entire extraction report.
And did you notice the deletion of photographs and other items in that phone?
I don't recall specific deleted
You don't
pictures.
recall?
I don't recall.
Now, in all of these phones that were recovered, did you ever recover the phone, Rochelle Bond's phone, Dee's phone, ending, the phone with the number ending 2792?
No, we never recovered that.
But you did obtain data, phone records relating to that phone, did you not?
Correct, yes.
I'm going to put on the monitor Exhibit 80. Is that up on your monitor?
Yes.
Okay. Now, it's fair to say that these are records of Dee's cell phone, correct?
Correct.
And these records show, and particularly the highlighted portions, that that phone was used to make calls as late as September 15th of 2015.
Correct.
Correct? And did you review the numbers that were called regularly by on Rochelle Bond's phone.
Yes.
And so the last number that's highlighted, 7411115, is Rochelle's, that's her SSI number, correct?
I don't have it committed to memory.
Okay.
So,
But you do know that she had a number she called SSI?
yes.
And do you know the one before that?
The-
The one 9972555?
No, I don't know what that number is.
Do you recall that Rochelle had a number that she called for her EBT card?
Yes.
Do you recall if that's the number or not?
Yes.
It is.
Okay.
Okay. So it's fair to say that as late as September 15th of 2015, Rochelle Bond had Dee's cell phone and was using it to make calls.
Yes.
But you've never recovered that phone.
No.
Did you make any investigation as to determine where that phone was or is?
Yes.
But you were unable to find it.
No.
But you would agree that having that phone might be of great significance in this investigation
It could be. Yes.
to determine when and where and with whom Rochelle Bond was communicating over the course of the many months that she did not disclose what had happened to her daughter.
Yes.
But not having been able to recover that phone, you weren't able to do that investigation to determine with whom she was in contact, when she was in contact with them, and what, if any, information passed between her and other people.
With whoever was using that phone, yes.
Now, in the course of
There's a pause here. There's a stipulation I understand council agreed to regarding cell phone records. Is this an appropriate time to read that during the stipulation?
sure.
The parties agreed cellular telephones retrieved in conjunction with this investigation were forensically examined by Detective Kevin Witherspoon of the Boston Police Department. The parties further agreed the cellular telephone records produced and introduced into evidence in conjunction with this case are the result of this forensic examination. So why don't I go ahead and mark that for as an exhibit, just like I did the other stipulation.
Exhibit 123.
Now, Trooper Herman, do you recall testifying at the grand jury that you had reviewed Rochelle Bond's phone records and had determined that she had not made any calls to COSA?
I do not recall that. I'd have to see them. I'd have to see the minutes.
Okay, I'm going to, this is page 61 of the grand jury testimony. It's looking at the bottom two lines, just read that to yourself. Have you read it?
Yes.
And now looking at the next page. And my question is, does this refresh your recollection as to whether you testified at the grand jury as to whether or not there were your examination of Rochelle Bond's cell phone records, are there any calls to COSA?
Yes.
And what was your, refreshing your recollection, what was your testimony?
Yes, there are.
What did you say to the grand jury?
Yes.
Maybe I'm not reading so well, but is it fair to say that the question was, and do in your examination of Rochelle Bond's cell phone records, are there any calls to COSA? And the answer is no. See that?
Yeah, I was looking at the wrong page. You had highlighted a few yes answers.
You're showing a different page than
No, no.
my screen just a minute ago.
I'm showing the exact same page. What's your answer?
The page you just showed me, both of my answers were
No.
yes.
I'm showing you the page now. This is 62. You
The
see up
page-
in the right-hand corner?
Page that I'm looking at now,
Okay.
the answer is no.
And this is 61, correct?
Yes.
And on 61, you were asked, in your examination of Rochelle Bond's cell phone records, are there any calls to COSA? Next page, answer, no. Was that your testimony?
What you just had up on the screen, I couldn't see the bottom of the page.
Mr. Shapiro, I think the confusion was there was a different page that I was looking
Well,
at.
When you're putting that up on the screen, I can't see that bottom question.
can you see it now?
I can see it now.
In your examination of Rochelle Bond's cell phone records, are there any calls to COSA?
Got it.
And what is your answer?
Next page, my answer is no.
That wasn't true, was it?
It's something that I wasn't aware of at the time.
Well, you told us that you had reviewed her cell phone records when you testified at the grand jury.
I have.
So if you had reviewed her cell phone records, and now I'm putting up Exhibit 62, these are Rochelle Bond's cell phone records, aren't they?
Refresh my memory as to the last four of Dee's phone.
2792.
So whoever was using the phone at the time, it appears there's calls to the number 2059.
Okay. And that's COSA, correct?
I believe so, yes.
In fact, there are a whole lot of calls from 2792 to COSA, aren't there?
This is it, yes.
Okay. So when you testified before the grand jury, you were under oath, correct?
Correct.
You were asked whether there were any calls to COSA on Rochelle Bond's phone, which you had identified as Dee's phone, correct?
We had a number of phones for Rochelle Bond's phone. The Dee's phone is undetermined. It's never been confirmed that she was using it.
What did you testify before the grand jury? Did you testify under oath before the grand jury that Rochelle Bond's phone was Dee's phone, correct?
Correct.
And then during that same testimony, you were asked whether there are any phone calls on Rochelle Bond's phone to COSA, and you said no. But you're telling us now that that wasn't true because you've just seen those calls, haven't you?
When I'm looking at the records, yes, correct. There
And
are
so-
a couple of phones. There are a couple of phones in question here. There are 2, perhaps 3 phones that may have been used by Rochelle Bond, and we won't know. We won't ever know who was also using Dee's phone.
But I'm not asking you that, Trooper Herman. I'm asking you whether, number one, you testified before the grand jury that the phone number ending 2792 was Rochelle Bond's phone and that it was designated Dee's phone.
Yes,
And that was under oath.
yes,
And then in that same testimony, you were asked whether there were any calls to COSA on that phone, correct?
correct,
And you said no.
correct.
So whether there are other phones or not relating to Rochelle Bond, the phone that you were testifying to, you testified about incorrectly.
It appears, yes.
Now, you testified that you interviewed Rochelle Bond, you personally interviewed Rochelle Bond at the Suffolk County Detectives Homicide Unit in Chelsea on September 18th of 2015.
Correct.
And that was about 10 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
And that interview took place over I think you said about 45 minutes?
Yes.
And during the time of the interview, Miss Bond was left alone in the room for periods of time.
Correct.
But there is a video feed from the room and an audio feed, and that was left on.
Yes.
And you've reviewed that video and audio feed.
Yes.
And so you know that when Ms. Bond was in the room, she was looking up to see if there was a camera.
Objection is the form. How would you know what she's looking at? She could
What? Based on what you saw in the video, does it appear that that's
Yes.
what she's doing?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's the question.
I don't recall. I don't remember seeing her looking up. And I wouldn't know what she's looking at.
Do you recall her, during the time that she was left alone in the room, you and other detectives had conversations out in the hall?
Correct.
Do you recall when you reviewed the video feed, you saw Ms. Bond going over the door and apparently listening or trying to listen to what was said outside?
objection is to that.
Well, you can describe what he saw, I think, without getting into what she was, her motivation. So yes, you can rephrase the question again.
Well, do you recall seeing her go over and appear to be trying to overhear the conversation in the hall?
That's the same question. That's the same.
My recollection, when she,
Hold on, I sustain the
Sorry.
objection. Mr. Shapiro, you can say what he observed without getting into what her intent was or state of mind. I'm sustaining it based on that. Go ahead and rephrase.
Did you see something, did you see Ms. Bond going over the door?
My recollection when she stood up was she wanted a cigarette. She was asking a couple of times if she could smoke a cigarette. So she was getting up and she was asking to do that.
Well, in fact, she asked for a cigarette the very first thing before the interview started.
A few times.
Did you ever give her a cigarette?
I don't remember.
In fact, you told her that your boss wouldn't allow anybody to smoke there.
Correct.
So she'd asked you at the beginning of the interview, correct?
Correct.
And when she was getting up and going to the door, she wasn't asking for a cigarette again, was she?
She asked a few times for a cigarette.
In any case, you're trained in interrogation, are you not?
Yes.
And the purpose of your interrogation or your interview of Ms. Bond was to get as much information from her concerning what had happened as possible.
Correct.
And is it fair to say you went about it in the way you were trained to do?
Given the circumstances, we did the best we could.
So you asked her about what had happened.
Yes.
And in the course of the interview, she was serious, was she not?
Yes.
And was able to give information to you clearly.
No.
No?
The
She wasn't?
interview that we conducted, I would not.
The question, Trooper Herman, is was she able to give information to you clearly?
My answer was no.
I'm showing you page 59, your grand jury testimony. If you look at lines 13 through 18, you see that? Just read it to yourself. Have you read it to yourself?
Yes.
So you do mention that she was very emotional at times, don't you?
I mentioned at times.
Do you just try the answer to the question? Did she? Did?
So Mr. Shapiro, you may not like the answer you're giving, but you should be allowed to.
No, I don't think that. I think I have a right to get an answer to the question without him volunteering anything.
Well, I'm reading his answer. If you want to have him read his answer, I'm happy with that. You can read his answer
And
to
I
the grand
also
jury.
should be able to bring it out the way I want.
Okay, but mischaracterizing the answer, I will not permit you to do. So that's
Well,
why I'm sustaining the objection.
Did you say that at times she was very emotional?
Yes.
Did you also say that she was serious and able to, give information to us clearly?
Yes.
Okay. So a moment ago when I asked you, you said she wasn't able to give you information clearly, but you agreed, do you not, that back on September, or when you testified before the grand jury, you said she was able to give you information clearly.
There were certain times she could be clear. The majority of the interview was not clear.
Okay.
She was in a
That's
I'm sorry,
not
he
what-
can finish his answer. Go ahead.
She was in a very agitated state. I think earlier I described she was a mess. And so there were times she was able to give a clear answer, and there were times that she wasn't.
Okay, but when I asked you if she was able to give you information clearly a moment ago, you said no.
In that
Did you say no?
yes.
But when you testified before the grand jury under oath quite
It's-
some time ago,
Okay, I'm sorry. That same question has already been asked and answered. That's sustained.
but you do agree that you said she was becoming serious and was able to give information to us clearly. Yes?
Yes.
Now, in addition to the statements that, well, she made the statements in the recorded interview, and that was over a course of 45 minutes.
Approximately.
And in the course of that interview, you asked Ms. Bond when this had occurred, when her child had been killed.
Yes.
And she told you in May, didn't she?
Yes.
And you wanted to know how she knew it was in May.
Yes.
And she told you it was before Mr. McCarthy's birthday on May 29th.
Correct.
And she didn't indicate any lack of clarity about that, did she?
I asked her a follow-up question, how did she know? And I remember she answered she thought it was around his birthday, or before his birthday.
Well, so, again, just to refresh your recollection, I'm going to ask you to look at page 7. You asked her, when is this night you're talking about? Do you remember?
Yes.
She says it was in the middle of May.
Yes.
And then you ask her, is there a reason you say that? Correct?
Yes.
And she says, cause his birthday was after it.
Correct.
And you ask, what's his birthday? May 29th.
Yes.
So, in the course of that discussion, she didn't indicate any doubt that it had happened before his birthday, did she?
No, that's when, that was the time frame she gave us, just a few days before his birthday.
And in fact, later in the interview, she told you that it had happened several days before his birthday. Correct?
I would have to review the transcripts.
Well, do you recall after the interview, the recorded interview, Ms. Bond indicated that she had remembered something more specifically. You recall?
Yes.
And she called one of the troopers back in the room, and she said she just remembered a detail. Correct?
Yes.
And she stated she now knows the date of the murder was 5/29/2015. Correct?
Again, I'd have to review the transcript. I don't have a
Let me just see if
exact
this
memory of it.
refreshes your recollection. This is a date stamped 4/79. If you look at the if you look at the bottom of this report, date stamp 4/79, it's fair to say that And she now states, Ms. Bond now states that the date was 5/27/15. Correct? Is that right?
Yes.
And she states, she stated this based on the knowledge that it had occurred 2 days before McCarthy's birthday, which is 5/29. Correct?
Correct.
All right, so she didn't say anything about remembering this because it had something to do with Mr. McCarthy's car, did she?
No.
She said that she remembered it was 2 days before his birthday, and that was that.
Yes.
You know, you recall testifying before the grand jury that Ms. Bond told you that she saw Mr. McCarthy leaning over Bella Bond and, quote, his hands were on her abdomen area. You recall saying that?
My recollection is that she
No,
described
The question was, do you recall saying what I just read you?
that
The grand jury evening?
her hands were on the abdomen.
On her abdomen area.
I don't remember my exact words now.
Page 42. You see lines 22, 23.
Would you like me to read my whole
Or
sentence?
just read it to yourself and see if that refreshes your recollection.
Yes.
Okay. You told the grand jury that Mr. McCarthy's hands were on her abdomen area.
Correct.
But that's not true, is it?
It's true based on my recollection, based on what the account that I was given to.
Well, you were present during the interview with Rochelle Bond.
Correct.
And that interview, you testified at the grand jury that you had reviewed that interview prior to your testimony on this particular day.
Yes.
And you know that there's nothing in Rochelle Bond's statement, your interview to her, where she says that she saw Mr. McCarthy's hands on her daughter's abdomen, is there?
She made gestures to us that indicated that his hands were moving in the abdomen area
Right.
of Bella.
But she never said that his hands were on the abdomen area, did she?
I don't recall what her exact words were. It was her movements combined with what she told us.
Isn't it true, Trooper Herman, that Ms. Bond told you that she had seen one of Mr. McCarthy's hands moving away from the body?
I believe moving away from the abdomen area. Excuse me.
You also told us about going to the beach area, Deer Island Beach,
Yes.
and observing the body as it was removed from the trash bags.
Yes.
And you told us that you saw that the body had been wrapped in 2 blankets.
Yes.
And you told us you didn't remember which blanket was wrapped around the body first and which one was over it.
Correct.
But one of the blankets was a pink blanket with, looked like, patches that you'd make from a quilt,
Butterfly floral print.
a baby blanket.
Yeah.
And the other blanket was sort of a zebra blanket.
Yes.
Now, in the course of your investigation, did you consider the fact that the body had apparently been carefully wrapped in a baby blanket and another blanket?
Yes, we did.
You did consider that. And it's fair to say that you did consider that this is what a mother might have done to her child.
I considered that whoever did this possibly cared for the child.
And that might be a mother.
Could be.
But when you interviewed Ms. Bond, she didn't tell you anything about the baby, her wrapping the baby in blankets, did she?
No.
Nor did she, in fact, she denied that she had even seen anybody put the child in, wrap the child, or even put the child in a trash bag.
That's correct.
Now, you indicated that you had obtained a search warrant for Mr. McCarthy's vehicle.
Yes.
And in the course of the search, you searched the trunk of the vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And that's because Ms. Bond had told you that she saw the body in a bag in the trunk.
Correct.
You also searched the other parts of the car.
Yes.
It's fair to say that nothing of any significance was found in the vehicle.
Correct.
In the course of your interview with Ms. Bond on September 18th, she never told you that she had blacked out on any occasion, did she?
I believe her recollection was that he snatched me up by the neck or something like that and brought her to the couch.
Right. But my question was, she didn't indicate at any time that she had been unconscious or blacked out.
My answer is it's unclear whether she lost consciousness or not.
Is it hard to understand my question?
No, I
My
understand.
question is, did she tell you at any time that she had lost consciousness?
She may have said she woke up on the couch or she was snatched me up by the neck. Again,
She may have?
she was not 100% clear about it.
You don't remember?
I would have to read the transcript.
When's the last time you read the transcript?
A couple days ago.
Um, and just to go back a moment, this is page 10
Of what? Are you having,
of Ms. Bond's statement.
and so this is to see if this refreshes his recollection again,
Yes,
is that it?
mhm.
Okay.
It's fair to say that Ms. Bond told you that she claimed to have seen Mr. McCarthy's arm move once, correct?
Which line are you reading?
Line 9.
Line 9 and 10.
Yes.
She said she thought she saw his arm move once, but she thought that he was picking her up, picking Bella up, correct?
Yes.
Just directing your attention a little further down the page. On line 12, you see that? And then he snapped or snatched me up by the neck.
It's snapped, yep. It says
Snapped.
snapped there.
Snapped.
Me up by the neck and told me if I said anything he'd kill me.
Yes.
So she doesn't say anything about becoming unconscious at that point, does she?
No.
Does that refresh your recollection as to whether she said during the interview that she had become unconscious or blacked out?
Yes.
So she didn't.
She did not.
And she didn't tell you that she became unconscious when she lay down on the couch, did she?
I think she went on to describe sort of being confused and being on the couch, but no, she did not describe blacking out.
And at some point, she told you that that Mr. McCarthy had taken her out of the house to the car. Correct?
Correct.
And you recall, she says that, well, let me ask you this. Did she ever tell you that when she got in the car, he knocked her unconscious by hitting her?
In trial,
No, I'm talking about your statement. the statement that she made to you on September 18th
No.
didn't
She's
say
not.
anything about knocking her unconscious, did she?
No.
And the in her statement, did she say anything to you about Mr. McCarthy having a mallet and a hammer and a knife when he took her to the car?
No.
Now, other than telling you in the portion that I just showed you a moment ago that she had seen Mr. McCarthy's hand moving away from the body as if he were picking her up or trying to pick her up, did Mr. McCarthy, did Ms. Bond ever say anything about, that is on September 18th when you interviewed her, did she say anything about having observed Mr. McCarthy strike Bella Bond with his fist in her stomach so hard that she jumped right off the mattress and fell back?
No.
And in fact, the only time that you're aware that she said that is when she was being prepared to testify a month or so ago.
Correct.
And even in those conversations, when she was being prepared for trial a few months ago, or a couple of months ago, during those conversations, she never said anything about becoming unconscious or being knocked out, did she?
Are you asking during trial preparation interviews?
Well, you recall that she made a number of statements,
Yes.
and as you're required, those statements were provided to the defense, correct?
Correct.
And in none of those statements that were provided to the defense did she say anything about being knocked out or becoming unconscious.
I recall her mentioning it.
You just tell me if they're in the statements, and if you don't remember...
I would have to read all of my statements.
Do you recall?
Okay.
She did mention that. Is that your-
She did mention, blacking out during this event.
And that's your testimony. That, and if she said that, you would have recorded it.
Yes. It would be in my notes.
I'm going to show you a document which refers to a March 12th interview with Ms. Bond. And let me just ask you, were you present during this interview?
Yes.
Just read that to yourself and tell me whether there's anything in that about her becoming unconscious or being knocked out.
Nope.
I'm going to show you another document which refers to a meeting on March 26th of 2017. and ask you to read this to yourself, and I'll ask you a question.
So in paragraph 2, do you want me to read it?
Yeah, just read,
Okay.
read it.
So I'm sorry, are you asking now, having read that, does he now remember something?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
As opposed to what it says in
Okay.
the document?
So just tell us.
So if I can summarize the paragraph.
Just that particular part.
Okay. Well, here she's talking about him choking me out and violently grabbing her on the neck. And 2 lines down, she states that when she awoke on the couch, she attempted to walk. And then continues.
And so the first time you heard anything about that was on March 26th.
Yes.
And even then, there was nothing about becoming unconscious on the couch afterwards. That is, after she was on the couch, losing consciousness again.
My understanding of her description was that she was grabbed by the neck and woke up on the couch.
But after that, there was no further indication of unconsciousness.
No.
And there was no indication at any time that when Mr. McCarthy took her to the car, he knocked her unconscious.
Correct.
And no mention in any of these statements of when she was taken to the car that Mr. McCarthy had a mallet, a hammer, or a knife.
No.
Now, you also mentioned that you had interviewed Michael Sprinsky,
Yes.
and did you determine where Michael Sprinsky, or on the basis of your interview, did you investigate where Michael Sprinsky had grown up?
Had grown up?
Yeah,
Yes.
and where was that?
South Boston.
Did you determine where he had lived?
Yes.
Is it fair to say he lived most recently at 744 East 3rd Street in South Boston?
I don't recall that specific address, but I know he lived in South Boston.
And if that were the address, and let me just put this on the monitor and see if that refreshes your recollection. Does it?
Yes.
Okay. So 744 East 3rd Street is about a block from where you had previously indicated that Michael McCarthy grew up.
Correct.
And that would put it about the same distance from the area where you say the divers found the weights in the bag.
Yes.
And you, in the course of your interviews with Mr. Amoroso, you learned that he had been homeless for a long period of time.
Correct.
And you're aware of various locations in the South Boston seaport area where homeless people often hang out.
Yes.
And I think one of the places that has been mentioned is the Fort Point Channel.
Correct.
Another is the Reserve Channel.
I'm sorry, the
The
last
Reserve
part.
Channel area.
As far as a homeless hangout area?
Yeah, where there are there are not constant police presence.
Not at the Reserve Channel. No.
Just the Fort Point Channel.
Yes.
There's some reason that homeless people only stay there and not the Reserve Channel.
My opinion would be its proximity to South Station. The Reserve Channel area is further to get to by walking. It's outside of Boston proper.
Well, so is the Fort Point Channel outside of Boston proper, isn't it?
No, it's a short walking distance across a bridge.
Well, it's in South Boston, isn't it?
Fort Point, it's right over the bridge.
Now, I'm putting Exhibit 99 on the monitor. This is the area you testified is the road running from, is it East Street?
East First Street.
East First Street, running down to the water.
Correct.
And you say this is a T property?
There's a MBTA parking lot. I don't know who owns the land that's directly onto the water, but there's a MBTA parking lot as you begin down this road.
Okay. So the parking lot is where? To the right?
As we're looking at the photo now, the MBTA lot would be to the right.
Is the MBT lot before or after you get to the fence?
It is just, it's the first parking lot as you enter it's on the inside of the fence.
Okay. Let me just show you Exhibit 100 and see if, is that the area before you get to the fence?
There's another fence, so there's one fence there and then there's another fence and a sort of, if you were to back up, you'd see there's another fence.
Let me back up then and show you Exhibit 101. Okay, is that the beginning of the road leading down to the water?
Yes,
And there is a gate there, correct?
there's a fence, yes.
And past this first gate, there are buses parked to the right,
Yes,
T-buses.
yes.
And then if you go through that fence, you see again the T-buses, and then there's another fence further down.
Correct.
And Exhibit 99 indicates that there is there are gates that close off that road.
Yes,
Now, these photographs were taken sometime in the middle to late September of 2015,
correct.
and there are no photographs which show this area back in May of 2015, are there?
No,
And so at that time, do you know whether these gates were closed or open?
no, I don't.
Now, you also testified about the search of 115 Maxwell Street, correct?
Correct.
And you described that you recovered 2 books. One of them, putting on the it's Exhibit 117. This is called Demons, the Devil, Possession, and Exorcism by Anthony Finlay.
Yes.
And you see that there is a library stamp on it.
Yes.
And then the other book, Exhibit 118, is called The Other God by Yuri Stoyanov, correct?
Correct.
And this too has a library stamp on it.
Yes.
And did you check with the library to see who took these books out?
No.
So, do you know they were found at 115 Maxwell Street?
There was no library card associated with them. There was no card inside the book.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
they
know.
were found at Maxwell Street.
I know, they were found at Maxwell Street, right?
Correct.
But the library has a record of presumably the last time the books were taken out, correct?
Correct.
Did you check?
No.
You weren't interested in who took the books out?
No, it's just not something that we did.
What, weren't you interested in finding out if Rochelle Bond had taken the books out or Michael McCarthy had taken the books out?
We did not check with the library.
My question was, weren't you interested to determine whether Rochelle Bond or Michael McCarthy had taken the books out?
Yes.
But even though you were interested, you didn't bother to check with the library?
My understanding was
No, not your understanding. Did you or did you not check with the library?
I answered no, we did not.
Did you read both of these books?
Did I read them?
Did you read them?
No.
So, other than the title and the contents, you don't know what the book is about.
No.
And do you know that it tells the story mainly of Judeo-Christian devil, although there is some tracing of the demonic back into antiquity?
No.
Do you know that it's a study that arises from the words and actions of Scripture, mainly those of the New Testament?
No.
Do you know that the author was presenting facts which raise some questions, give some personal experience from a Christian viewpoint?
No.
Do you know that the author was a Catholic cleric?
I did not know that.
And do you know that the book was attempted to distinguish between the views of the Roman Catholic and Protestant churches on the topic of demonology?
No.
So you don't even know what's in the book, do you?
No.
You don't know whether there are any descriptions of exorcism, do you?
Just from the glossary, the chapter devoted to
You don't-
exorcisms, but
You don't know that this is just a historical study?
no, I did not.
And what about the other God by Yuri Stoyanov? Did you read that?
No.
Were you at all interested in what was in either of these books?
No.
So then what's the point of seizing them?
It's just something that we identified. There were statements made to us about Michael McCarthy's interest in the occult and the dark arts and demons. So it's something that we obtained, something we held on to corroborate those statements.
But you weren't interested whether that interest was an academic interest or some kind of a dark and sinister interest?
The obsession, or if there was an obsession with the occult, was never anything that sort of piqued my interest very much, no. I was interested in gathering facts and statements.
So you're telling us that that you want to present, or you thought it relevant to present these books about which you know nothing.
Excuse me, you're going to say this, repeat this question, please.
Is it your testimony that in connection with this investigation, you want to present to this jury books about which you know absolutely nothing?
No. These books are something that witnesses mentioned to us. We seized them as evidence. I'm not making any judgment or conclusion as to who reads these books or the validity of the books. I'm just gathering them as evidence.
What is the relevance of the book if you don't even know what's in it?
We had 2 witnesses who told us about Michael McCarthy's interest in devils and the occult. So when we saw the books, there was something that was of interest to us, and we took them into evidence.
Yeah, but the witnesses who told you about his interest in the occult told you that he had all these dark, sinister, crazy interests, didn't they?
Yes.
They told you that he was sort of off the deep end in his interest in the occult and Satan and so on, correct?
So, sir, my answer is we seized these books because they were mentioned. I'm not making any judgment as to who reads these books.
But the people who told you about the books told you that Michael's interest was sinister, off the deep end, crazy, correct?
I don't recall their exact words, but they were
Along those
they thought that they were crazy. Yes.
Okay, along those lines.
Yeah.
So you found these books, but you didn't make any effort to determine whether the contents of these books were consistent with somebody who had this kind of weird obsession, or on the other hand, they were consistent with somebody who might genuinely be interested in the spiritual nature of devils and demons as reflected in the New Testament and the Scriptures.
Sure. So it's not my place to judge. I just gathered the evidence.
You just gather the evidence and present it to a jury.
I gathered the evidence and I presented it to the district attorney's office.
And the district attorney presents it to the jury.
Yes.
Now, you told us about CSLI, that's cell site location information.
Correct.
And this is information that you obtained from the records of the various cell phones, or some of the cell phones that you recovered.
Correct.
And it's true, is it not, that this information, that the CSLI, or the cell site location information, reports what cell tower that a particular telephone, when in use, bounces off of?
Correct.
So if, for example, I made a cell phone call from this courtroom, there would be some cell phone tower in the vicinity which this call would bounce off of and be transferred to the recipient of that call.
That's correct.
And it doesn't necessarily have to have, that is, the phone doesn't necessarily have to be making a call for it to ping off or be transferred by a tower, does it?
It needs to be making a call, receiving a call, or text.
What about if an application is on the phone and the application is working?
The mere use of data, as far as I'm concerned, does not indicate a hit off a tower. Only incoming or outgoing text or calls would be recorded.
Do you recall testifying before the grand jury that if there was an application running on the phone at the time, it would ping off a tower?
My understanding of that is it would have to be a messaging application, voice call or a text, some sort of messaging, communication being received or sent.
Okay. It's also true, is it not, that cell phones don't necessarily ping off the nearest tower?
For me to answer that, I would need to refer to one of our technical. This is why I employed the services of troopers like David Swan and Sergeant Krause. They have
I understand one of them was supposed to maybe testify, right? Okay, so we're going to hear testimony from.
Well, you testified before the grand jury, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And when you testified before the grand jury, you testified that calls do not necessarily ping off the closest tower.
That is my understanding of it. However, my understanding is very limited to the technical aspects of tower hits.
Well, you went on to describe that it depends upon cell phone traffic in the area at the time of the call.
Yes, that's my understanding.
So if at the particular second the call is made, the cell phone traffic in the area is such that the nearest tower is busy, it'll go to another tower in the area.
That is my understanding, yes.
Thank you, Trooper Herman. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Deacon, yes.
Trooper Herman, early on in his cross-examination, defense counsel asked you whether, if you had the phone that's been come to be known as Dee's cell phone,
Yes.
that it would tell you whom she was communicating with and the substance of that communication. You
Yes.
recall that? The cell phone records that were subpoenaed and obtained for that phone,
Yes.
and I believe it was from May 1st through September, middle of September, is that
Yes.
correct? Would those cell phone records show who the person using that phone was communicating with?
Outgoing calls, yes.
And incoming calls too?
Yes.
So it wouldn't show the content of text messages or phone calls, right?
Correct.
But it would show who the person using the phone was in contact with, is that right?
That's correct.
And even if you had the phone, you wouldn't have the content of phone calls, would you?
Correct.
Did Rochelle Bond, during the interview, defense counsel asked you whether she had testified, whether she had told you in the September 18th interview that she had lost consciousness? Do you recall that?
Yes.
And did she tell you during the course of the September 18th interview that shortly after the murder, the defendant shot her in the neck with heroin?
Yes.
And finally, defense counsel asked you whether the forensic examination of Ms. Bond's Nokia phone, the old phone with photographs on it, captured deleted photographs. Do you recall that?
Yes.
What is your understanding about whether when Detective Witherspoon does, under the stipulation that the judge just read, that when he does forensic exams, does he seek to recover deleted material?
Yes.
And do you recall, as you sit here today, when you were looking through the phone, whether you saw deleted material that had not marked deleted?
I don't remember seeing deleted calls.
Can I show you something on a laptop and ask you to look at it? Do you recognize what this is an excerpt from? A page from?
This is a page from the physical report from the Nokia phone.
Rochelle Bond's phone?
Yes.
And does looking at that refresh your recollection as to whether Detective Witherspoon was able to capture photographs that had been deleted?
The folder isn't titled deleted, however, each of the images on the description of underneath the photo, it's actually indicated that the photos have been deleted.
And yet they appear in the report.
Yes.
Now, can you tell from this whether all of the deleted photos were captured?
There are a few images on this page where it's like a stock image. It's a stock image and not the actual photo. So.
But are there also deleted images that were not captured?
Yes, correct.
So, based on your review, what does it appear to you as to whether Detective Witherspoon was able to capture some deleted images?
Correct.
He was?
Yes.
But not all deleted images?
Not all of them.
But they were all searched? The effort was made to recover them?
That's correct.
I have no further questions.
Anything else, Mr. Shapiro?
Nothing further.
Okay. Thank you, Trooper. You can step down your
Thank you, Your
excuse.
Honor. Thank you.
Your Honor, the people of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts call Anthony Alestock. And while we're waiting for him, Your Honor, Commonwealth will move to introduce certified records from the Sprint Corporation. And come to the scene.
Do you want to just show them to Mr. Shapiro? Okay, so there's no objection to that?
No,
Okay, so this will be exhibit,
124.
and how would you describe that exhibit, Mr.
These are
Deacon?
certified business records from the Sprint Corporation, Your Honor. And if I may publish just one quick section for the jurors.
Okay.
So I'm showing page from Exhibit 124, Sprint Records, that refers to the subject number in the line. Subject number says 857-526-2792. And in the account details, billing account number and account billing addresses. Indicates Michael McCarthy, 618 Hancock, Quincy, Mass. Oh, and I should also, sorry, Your Honor, I also wanted the jury to note the effective date just above Michael McCarthy of 8/6/2014.
Okay, those records are in evidence, so can we bring in the witness now?
Thank you, Your Honor.
So you're gonna start right here, you're gonna raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony you shall give this court and jury, the issue now pending to the Commonwealth, you're the defendant at the bar, swear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, I do.
Have a seat, please.
So the head, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please introduce yourself to the jurors and spell your last name for the court report.
Trooper Anthony Alestock, A-L-E-S-T-O-C-K.
And how are you employed?
I'm a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police.
How long have you been with the Massachusetts State Police?
21 years.
Can you please describe the course of your career with the State Police? How you started and where you went?
After graduating the academy in 1996, I was employed. I worked for several state police barracks as a patrol officer. From that point, I was assigned to the State Police Academy as a drill instructor, as well as a defensive tactics instructor. I spent 5 years riding horses for the State Police, and for the last 6 years, I've been assigned to the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office as a detective.
In what unit?
I'm sorry?
What's the name of the unit there?
Suffolk County State Police Detective Unit.
And what are your responsibilities with the Suffolk County State Police Detective Unit?
Being on call as, as a detective, we respond to any death that takes place in the Suffolk jurisdiction of Suffolk County.
And Trooper Alestock, were you involved, well, let me ask you first, were you involved in the effort to identify an unidentified preschool-age girl whose body had washed up on the beach at Deer Island?
Yes.
And what was your role, what function or roles did you play in the course of trying to identify her?
I assisted Trooper Herman following any leads that came into our office. I was present during the recovery of certain evidence for the case.
Let me ask you though, in terms of when you say, following leads that came in to try to identify the girl, what was involved? You don't have to obviously describe all of them, but first of all, approximately how many leads would you say you were personally involved in checking? A ballpark figure.
Maybe 50 or 60 out of a few hundred leads that came in.
And what was involved in tracking down those leads and running down those leads?
Either contacting the person that would call our office or State Police Headquarters and leave their contact information. And I in turn would reach out to them and conduct an interview on the phone, over the phone with them.
Did you ever have to do more than just interview them over the phone?
Just on the phone.
And once Baby Doe had been identified as Bella Bond, did you remain involved in the investigation of her death?
I did.
And what was the first thing that you did in connection with that?
I was notified by my supervisor, Lieutenant Robert Murphy, to respond to 115 Maxwell Street in the city of Dorchester.
Before that, had you had any role in the autopsy?
Yes.
And when did that take place, if you recall?
I don't recall. I know it was June, I believe the 25th. I don't recall the exact date.
If I suggested to you the 25th was the date that her body was found, does that help you with the date?
So the autopsy was conducted the following day, which is June 26th.
And you attended that?
Yes.
And was that autopsy recorded in some way?
Yes.
How was that?
There's a trooper who was assigned to the State Police Crime Scene Unit. His job was to digitally take photographs of the deceased.
And then you said, and I'm sorry, I asked you questions out of order, so I didn't mean to confuse anybody, you, me, or anyone else. But you said that you were, after Baby Doe had been identified, you were assigned to go to 115 Maxwell Street?
That's correct.
For what purpose?
To secure the facility, the apartment, and wait until we received authorization to execute a search warrant.
And just quickly, when you say secure the apartment, what does that mean?
We secure the apartment. We don't allow any access to the apartment whatsoever. Doesn't matter who it is.
And do you recall approximately what time of day you were sent there to secure the apartment?
I believe it was around 4 p.m.
And how long did you stay there?
to about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
And how long, after you were there in the afternoon, how long did you have to wait before people came to execute a search warrant?
I believe we executed the warrant, I'd say around 11:30, 11:27 that night.
And did you have a role in the execution of the search warrant?
Yes.
What was that role?
I was the evidence officer.
And what does that mean?
I document any evidence that's secured from the, that's seized or secured from the apartment. My job is to document what the evidence is and who actually located the evidence.
And in the course of doing that, did you look all around the apartment?
Yes.
Was that the execution of that search warrant documented, or the scene, was the scene documented in some way?
Yes, it was.
How's that?
With video as well as photographs.
Have you, I'm going to show you an item on the monitor. Can you see that? Is it, oh no, I think it's blank for you, I'm sorry. Can you see what that is?
Yes.
And it's not. What is that?
It's a CD case that's marked as evidence.
And have you had a chance to review the evidence on that CD case?
Yes.
What is it?
It's a video that was taken from the night of the execution of the search warrant.
And is that video a fair and accurate depiction of how the apartment appeared before the search warrant was executed?
Yes.
Before the search was actually conducted?
That's correct.
Ask that this be marked next sequential exhibit, Your Honor, and ask for a chance to publish it to the jury.
Any objection? No objection, we'll look at it.
And with the court's permission, I'm going to ask, rather than put questions to Trooper Alestock during the playing of the video, I'm going to ask that he be allowed to simply describe, as we're looking, what rooms we're looking at, just sort of,
That's fine.
unless there's an objection from defense counsel, I think it goes smoothly. And Trooper Alestock, just for the sake of clarity, I'm sorry, this has skipped ahead a little bit already. For the sake of clarity, is there sound to this video?
There is no sound.
If you could tell us what we're looking at here.
Okay, this is a view. That was the view of the entrance to the apartment itself.
The door, the front door of the
The
apartment?
front door, which is numbered as number 2, or labeled as number 2, excuse me. To your left is the living room of the apartment. As you enter the front door, it kind of splits. Either you go to the left for the living room, or if you go straight ahead, it leads you right into the kitchen. And that door on the right there, that is a closet door. Now this is the living room, and to the door to the left, off the living room, is a bedroom number 1. The room there that to your right that contains the red curtains, that is the kitchen area or dining area. And that is a doorway that leads right into the kitchen. This is the shot is taken from in the living room itself, facing the bedroom, as I mentioned. And as you can see to your left is a some type of sofa. It's still in the living room, facing into the bedroom, the front bedroom. This is inside that bedroom.
The front bedroom?
That's correct. Another view inside the front bedroom.
And this is a view from where?
Standing in the living room, facing the kitchen area. A view of the kitchen, obviously, / dining area. That is a view of the hallway, which leads into the rear bedroom, as well as the bathroom. A view of that hallway that leads out to the rear bedroom. This is from in that small hallway. The door to the left is the bathroom. The room straight ahead is the rear bedroom. and there is a door to your right which leads to the back hallway. That's a view of the rear bedroom. And this is a view from the rear hallway towards the kitchen.
Trooper Alestock, did you recover a number of items during the search warrant?
Yes,
And did you record those items in some way?
I did.
How did you record them?
Document them on a notebook pad as well as in a report fashion.
And among those items, did you recover nasal syringes?
Yes.
And where did you recover those from?
On the kitchen counter, there's a blue basket that's right next to the refrigerator.
Did you recover books?
Yes.
Did you, as you were looking around the apartment, did you look everywhere where items might be?
Yes.
Did you see any sign of weights,
No, I did not.
barbells, dumbbells, anything like that?
I did not.
See any sign of exercise equipment?
Not at all.
How long was the search?
Between 2 and 3 hours.
Did you have a role in the case beyond the execution of that search warrant?
In what way?
Did you interview any witnesses, neighbors, that kind of thing?
Yes.
How many people did you interview among witnesses or neighbors?
There were 2 neighbors that I interviewed that lived upstairs in apartment 4.
Do you recall their names?
Eileen Hamiz, I believe the last name is, as well as her mother, Kawawa.
And maybe, if it will help you recall the name and spell it for the court reporter, do you have something you could consult to
Yes.
refresh your memory on the name?
Yes.
May he consult it?
Eileen is the daughter, Aileen. Hermiz, Hermiz.
And what's the mother's name?
Kawawa, Khawa. Same last name, Hermiz.
Were you involved or were you present at a dive in the reserve channel on Monday, September 21st, 2015?
Yes, I was.
And did you have any role in recovering evidence during that dive?
During that dive, I did not.
Were you present for a second search warrant at 115 Maxwell Street, apartment 2?
I was.
And do you recall when that was?
I don't recall the exact date.
Is there something you could consult to refresh your recollection?
There's nothing that I have.
Okay. Was it later that week?
Yes.
If I suggested to you that it was the 22nd, the next day after the dive, would that refresh your memory?
Yes.
And during the execution of that search warrant, were items recovered?
Yes.
What type of items?
A refrigerator, as well as some books that were in the apartment.
And was a mattress recovered as well?
A mattress as well, a twin mattress.
Trooper Alestock, I'm showing you what's now been marked Exhibit 30, A, B, and C. Do you recognize those items?
Yes.
And what do you recognize those to be?
Blue syringes.
And do you recognize, have you seen these before?
Yes.
Where have you seen them before?
In the apartment.
Other than the fact that the blue syringes appear to have been cut for analysis, is this how these syringes appeared when you recovered them?
Yes.
When you indicate that you recovered books, showing you Exhibits 117 and 118, do you recognize these?
Yes.
What are those?
2 books that were recovered from the second search warrant.
So, Mr. Deegan, I'm not sure where you stand.
I'm about to finish.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to show you on the monitor 2 photographs. And ask you if you recognize what they depict.
Yes.
What does that depict?
It's a photograph of several prescription medication bottles.
And where were they recovered from?
The apartment.
And were they in the position that they're in on the stove when you saw them, or were they placed there to take a picture?
They were placed there in order for us to take a picture.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of how those bottles appeared after you placed them there to take that photograph?
Yes.
And showing you a second photograph.
What do you recognize that to be?
Same photos of prescription medications that were located in the apartment.
A little bit closer up?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction again of how the bottles were when you saw them in the apartment, other than the fact that they were moved to take the picture?
That is correct.
As the DT Mark makes 2 sequential exhibits.
There being no objection, that's presented.
126 or 27.
If I may just publish 126 briefly for the jury, Your Honor.
I have no further questions.
So, Mr. Shapiro, are you going to be taking more than a few minutes for cross-examination of this witness?
I do.
So would you like to resume tomorrow? I'm just trying to get a time frame.
Yeah, I think it would make sense.
Okay. Okay, we'll do that. Then taking a break today, returning tomorrow to begin at 9 o'clock. Tomorrow will be a full day. I just want to remind you again not to talk